Scarred by struggle, transformed by hope. For a long time, a very long time, people around the world have debated, if not formally, then informally or privately, perhaps just in the intimacy of their own heads, the question, is struggle good for us? Is suffering good for us? And maybe at this time of year, at the end of one year and at the beginning of another, we review the amount of struggle and suffering that we each have experienced in that year and anticipate if and how we will struggle and suffer in the year ahead. Many people feel that struggle and suffering are good for us, that they build in us muscle and character. Perhaps the most famous words in favour of this position are those by Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche said, "That which doesn't kill us makes us stronger." It speaks to us of the benefits of adversity and the rich blessings that are sometimes disguised beneath the pain of suffering and the exhaustion of a struggle that often appears to have no relief in sight. One reading of the Genesis creation story in the Hebrew Scriptures sees Adam and Eve viewing the Garden of Eden as some kind of Swiss sanitarium or hedonistic spa town, where everything there is on tap, and they need not struggle for anything. Of course, they are bored. They need to struggle, and so the fruit is bitten, and a life of struggle is embarked upon, freely desired and freely chosen. The psychologist and author Martin Seligman tells the story of a life desperate to struggle. He says, "What is the good life? One of my teachers, Julian Hayes, kept an Amazonian lizard as a pet in his laboratory. In the first few weeks after getting the lizard, Julian could not get it to eat. He tried everything, but it was starving right before his eyes. He offered it lettuce, and then mango, and then ground pork from the supermarket. He swatted flies and offered those flies to the lizard. He tried live insects and Chinese takeaway. He blended fruit juices. The lizard just refused everything and was slipping into a torpor. One day, Julian brought a ham sandwich and proffered it to the lizard. It showed no interest. Going about his routine, Julian picked up the New York Times and began to read. When he had finished the first section, he tossed it down on top of the ham sandwich. The lizard took one look at this configuration and crept stealthily across the floor, leapt onto the newspaper, shredded it, and then gobbled up the ham sandwich. The lizard needed to stalk and shred before it could eat. Lizards have evolved to stalk and pounce and shred before they eat. So essential was the exercise of this strength to the life of this lizard that its appetite could not be awakened until that strength had been engaged. No shortcut to happiness was available to that lizard. Human beings are immensely more complex than lizards. Our requirements are vastly more complex than stalking, pouncing, and shredding, but they can be ignored only at considerable cost. The belief that we can rely on shortcuts to gratification is a folly. I think that's a wonderful story. Sometimes we need to struggle. Like the Amazonian lizard, we need to fight a bit, to struggle for what we need and what we want in life. If it comes to us too easily, we feel the victory, the accomplishment, to be cheap. The child psychologist Edward Hallowell says that even preschool children know this is true. He cites an occasion at his son's nursery school in the United States. He says that half the children planted tomato seeds and nurtured them into tomato plants. When the plants were ripe, the children who planted them were taken out into the garden to see them. They were ecstatic, and they were proud of their role in bringing them to fruition. The other half of the class were brought into the garden and given a wooden stalk, upon which real ripe tomatoes were blue-tacked. This group were not at all impressed with their crop. Yes, they were tomatoes, and the fact that they were impressive-looking tomatoes much better than their peers' homegrown ones, but they had not taken part in their development. They had not worked and mastered and struggled like their peers, and it showed. And needless to say, the children who had nurtured their own tomatoes looked at the blue-tacked ones with some amusement and disdain. We need to struggle. Struggle shapes us and shapes us again and again. It is the potter's kiln in life, the heat that creates the colour and quality of the glaze that are our years. But the heat of the kiln also shrinks us down to size. We diminish the notion of struggle when we talk of struggle, but really mean difficulties. Struggle is never done without considerable cost. And real struggle marks us for life. It is a battle that is forever seething in the depths of us. It cannot be smoothed over, and it can never be undone. Struggle can be good for us. It can develop a muscle that needs developing, but it can also be bad for us. The wrong kind of struggle, too much struggle, struggle experienced when we are in the wrong place or at the wrong time or both, or when we are already depleted or unsupported. That kind of struggle is bad for us. It can destroy us. And not all people agree with Friedrich Nietzsche that which does not kill us makes us stronger. The Australian psychologist and author Dorothy Rowe says that suffering too readily breeds martyrs of people, that people begin to equate suffering with virtue. They cannot see themselves as valuable or acceptable because to suffer is to somehow be good, and not to suffer is to be bad. So to suffer is to always view yourself as good, and so suffering you keep doing. She wisely says, suffering is neither virtuous nor wicked. Suffering is suffering. It is nothing else. Some people suffer and become wiser, more patient and more tolerant, but many do not. Some stay as they always were, and others become more mean, more self-interested, and more selfish. And she stresses, many people seek out suffering because they believe it to be virtuous, and believing this, they clutch it to their bosom and will not let it go. Suffering, she says, is a great waste of time. There are only two advantages to be had from it. The first is that we learn that we are no different from other people, and the second is that we can learn from suffering how to appreciate the happiness we once had and that we might have in the future. So we need to struggle sometimes, and sometimes we need to stop struggling. Sometimes in the grip of a struggle we need to hold fast and hold on, and sometimes we need to let go, to surrender to the struggle. Sometimes in some instances, to let go, to surrender, is part of the struggle. The Unitarian Universalist minister, the Reverend Forrest Church, speaks of his 30 years in the Unitarian ministry, a ministry that was often very troubled. He says, over the years, my parishioners have taught me two lessons. When cast into the depths, to survive, we must first let go of things that will not save us, then reach out for things that can. Certainly this winter just gone, when I felt desperately unhappy, that sentence was one I kept going back to again and again. Let go of what's not working and find what will. Until we can free ourselves from our attachment to false sources of security and let go of illusions, we will remain in the abyss. And with respect to the latter, the most important thing to remember is that lifelines have two ends. To grasp one end, however tightly, avails us nothing unless the other end is secured, unless we reach out to and for others, seeking meaning not in our own suffering, but in our shared experience of the human condition. Only then our lifelines will not hold. When we struggle in